Who actually manages Nintendo? We've seen interviews with the game directors, watched directs with the top producers, and we know some of the most famous faces who front Nintendo corporate events. But who, day to day, are the leaders of Nintendo's corporate structure? Who are the people at the very top of the food chain, but who are also directly involved in shaping the direction of the video gaming giant? It's time to meet the 11 crucial people who are the true head honchos for the whole of Nintendo, the executive officers of Nintendo Company Limited. They're an interesting group, and in this video, we're going to find out a little bit more about Nintendo's most senior team. Before we go further, we should break down this list a little bit into 3 broad categories of executive officer. Firstly, we have directors who are also senior executive officers of the company. Then we have senior executive officers who are not yet directors, although historically it seems that many senior executive officers did progress to directors within a few years. Finally, we have just the regular executive officers. In general, each of these people has responsibility for a key plank of Nintendo's business, so let's settle in and take a good look at what they're up to. First of all, the Senior Managing Executive Officer of Nintendo and the General Manager of the Entertainment Planning and Development Division, or as is better known, EPD, is Shinya Takahashi. Takahashi-san has become the face of Nintendo Direct since the passing of Satoru Iwata, and in many ways, he is Iwata's most direct successor, at least in the game development side of the company, balancing experience as an executive with deep reserves of experience as a game developer himself. Starting as a designer, he worked on the 3D computer graphics, motion capture and character design for a range of titles going back to Yuyuki, soon after he joined the company in April 1989, but his biggest claim to fame is probably as the co-director with Katsuya Iguchi of the early Nintendo 64 title Wave Race 64. Despite his background being more on the artistic side than the technical side, he has risen through the ranks, becoming Deputy General Manager of the Software Planning and Development Division, the precursor to EPD, in July 2012, and then becoming a director in 2013. When Nintendo restructured their development teams in 2015, forming what is now known as Nintendo EPD, Takahashi-san took the position of General Manager, a position he still holds nearly a decade later. He also became the supervisor of the Development, Administration and Support Division and a supervisor of the Business Development Division. Within a year after Tatsumi Kimishima succeeded Satoru Iwata, he became the Managing Executive Officer, and he was bumped to a Senior Managing Executive Officer in 2018. Having just turned 60, we can expect him to remain at the head of Nintendo's development arm for a fair time yet, and with President Shuntaro Furukawa coming from a business and not a game development background, and Shigeru Miyamoto now moonlighting on other projects such as the films and theme parks, Shinya Takahashi probably has the biggest direct control over the games Nintendo makes of anybody in the company. However, there is another managing executive officer and director. Meet Satoru Shibata. Shibata-san is responsible for the marketing division and the licensing division, the latter of which is evidently a more significant part of Nintendo's business than ever in the wake of the Mario movie, the theme parks, and the increased merchandising activity around Nintendo's properties in recent years. Although he first joined the company in April of 1985, he hasn't been cooped up in their Kyoto offices all this time. In February 1999, he became the president of Nintendo of Australia, and in June 2000, he took over as the president of Nintendo Europe GmbH. To clarify, GmbH is the equivalent of a limited company in English, but since Nintendo of Europe is based in Germany, it's called Gesellschaft mit beschränkter Haftung, or Company with Limited Liability. After 16 years running Nintendo of Europe, he became an executive officer in June 2016. He was appointed as an outside director of the Pokemon Company in May 2018, strengthening the ties between Nintendo and one of their most important part-owned companies. While in June 2018, he became a director, a senior executive officer, and was promoted to being the general manager of both the marketing division, the licensing division, and in charge of the planning department and the global marketing department. Looking at the timing, my hunch is that he was really replacing the skill set that Tatsumi Kimishima, who had similar experiences, had previously offered the company before his retirement. Kimishima-san had been a president of Pokemon USA Inc. since 2001, the head of Nintendo of America for a time from 2004, and of course at this point was retiring after a stint as the temporary president between the passing of Satoru Iwata and the appointment of his more permanent replacement, Shuntaro Furukawa. With Shinya Takahashi leading game development and Satoru Shibata running the business end, the two managing senior executive officers have most bases covered. But there is actually a third senior executive officer, and it's quite an interesting one. Ko Shiota won't be as well known as others on this list, but you certainly know his work. Since joining the company in 1992, he worked his way up under Genyo Takeda in the field of console development. He researched semiconductor technology for the Wii, and as the Deputy General Manager of the Product Development Department in the early 2010s, he supervised the Wii U and the Wii U gamepad. Following the loss of Satoru Iwata, Nintendo immediately restructured to make Genyo Takeda a technology fellow for a short period before his own retirement, and this left space for Ko Shiota to step into the role of the General Manager of the Platform Technology Development Division, effectively overseeing the rest of the development of Nintendo Switch, as well as all the Switch iterations and other consoles like the new 2DS XL and the NES and SNES mini consoles. He became an executive officer in June 2016, a director and senior executive officer in June 2017, demonstrating a meteoric rise which I suspect was partly accelerated by the huge success of the Nintendo Switch, and he is now one of the company's longest-serving executives. One further senior executive officer is, with effect from June 2024, a director as well, and this is Yusuke Beppu. I deep dive Beppu-san in a little more depth in my video on the June director changes, so I'm going to recommend you check out that video for more on him specifically. I'll link it in the video description and at the end, but suffice to say that Beppu-san is the manager of the corporate planning department and has a long experience in the field of marketing, working on multiple projects for the company over the years, including working on the Club Nintendo reward program, and he is a director of the Nintendo Systems Company, one of Nintendo's new subsidiaries that I've deep dived separately, and again, the links will be below and on the end screen. That leaves just two senior executive officers who are not yet directors. The general manager of the manufacturing division, Hirokazu Shinji, has a major task ahead of him, and I rather suspect that if the launch of the next Nintendo system goes well, he will be next in line for promotion to the board of directors. It's not his first rodeo though, as he has been running manufacturing for the Big N since June 2016, which of course encompasses the launch of the original Nintendo Switch. That system had a great launch, although supply was a little bumpy in the early days. He has also been in charge during the period of the move in manufacturing from China to significant parts of it moving to Vietnam. As with many of Nintendo's less public-facing positions, there's not a lot that he said in public, but he did address concerns over supply issues in 2018 during an investor Q&A. He explained, "It was a tough environment last year and it was not easy to procure parts, such as memory and passive components, but I think that manufacturers were exceptionally willing to cooperate with us because of the momentum of our product, Nintendo Switch, and because we shared with them our vision. Not only last year, but from several years ago, we have seen rather tough situations come and go with regard to memory, so we have spent a lot of time communicating with manufacturers and continue to negotiate on factors such as prices and lead times. This year is turning out to be another tough one, and that may well continue into next year, it being 2019 at the time, so we will continue our conversations with them to make sure we are getting adequate supply at a price that is as close to what we're looking for as possible. As for production quantities during this fiscal year, I believe we can have the units ready to meet our forecasts." Now I have to say, I do not envy him his role at all at this time, and of course I have another video deep diving Nintendo's manufacturing issues if you're interested in seeing the challenges with which he will even now be wrestling. The other senior executive officer is someone far better known though to fans. Not only has he been the face of multiple Nintendo Directs and the Switch launch, but he also has a very rich history of game development, co-directing The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask and directing Super Mario Sunshine and Super Mario Galaxy. When Nintendo decided around 2002 to set up a development team in Japan's modern capital in the heart of Tokyo, Koizumi-san was one of the more senior figures to make the jump, and for a long time was the senior producer for the Tokyo-based EPD8, which brought us the 3D Mario titles as well as Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. Personally though, for all Yoshiaki Koizumi's wonderful contributions to gaming history over the decades, I'm not sure he has a greater achievement at Nintendo to his name than coming up with the absolutely incredible, beautiful story of the Link's Awakening game, a game so painfully beautiful that I truly think it's a work of staggering artistry in all its many iterations. Koizumi-san's contributions to Nintendo games are too numerous to count, but of particular note he was the general producer of the Nintendo Switch console itself, the success of which led him to becoming first an executive officer in 2018 and then a senior executive officer in 2020. With his passion for storytelling sometimes bringing him into conflict with Shigeru Miyamoto, especially after adding a large storytelling component to Super Mario Galaxy, I could see him becoming a strong voice for, shall we say, the Thousand Year Door approach to game narratives over the Color Splash approach going forward. It's also possible to imagine that he might move over into the film development arena at some point in the years ahead if Shigeru Miyamoto decides to take a step back from that aspect of his job portfolio. He is, alongside Animal Crossing Supremo Katsuya Iguchi, the Deputy General Manager of Nintendo EPD, and as he's still in his mid-50s, he is very much on the young side for someone in Nintendo's top brass. I think we can expect Koizumi-san to have a massive role at the company over the next couple of decades, and given the breathtaking quality of the work he's put in so far, I think that's something we can all feel very glad about. Now that wraps up our tour of the senior executive officers at Nintendo, but they also have 5 regular executive officers in their management structure. The general manager of the Finance Administrative Division in charge of investor relations is Hajime Murakami, who was first promoted in 2018 from being a deputy general manager with responsibility for finance, possibly in response to the promotion of Shuntaro Furukawa to the company's presidency. He has accompanied Shuntaro Furukawa for investor Q&A briefings, but I can find no public statements that he has given. The same applies to the general manager of the gloriously dull-sounding General Affairs Division, Kentaro Yamagishi, who is in charge of the Quality Assurance Department, another lesser-known figure outside the company, but who undoubtedly has a vital role to fulfill given Nintendo's historic focus on quality, and indeed the struggle they've had to maintain that reputation over recent years because of Joy-Con issues. But the next person needs no introduction, as Nintendo of America Inc.'s president, Doug Bowser, is also an executive officer at Nintendo. Granted though, compared to his immediate predecessor, Doug Bowser does seem to have taken a step back from the limelight. I sometimes feel that while Reggie Fils-Aimé often had a knack for taking boring, boilerplate corporate speak and making it sound whizzy and exciting and thrilling, Doug Bowser has the opposite skill. He can take things that are whizzy and exciting and make them sound like boring, boilerplate corporate speak. This is not a criticism, and actually I suspect it's exactly what Nintendo are looking for at the present time. When people are piling in questions about the next Zelda game or the next system, it seems beyond the skill of even the most ardent Nintendo journalists to wrest from him an even mildly interesting quote. When the chips are down, Nintendo sometimes need fireworks to go off, and the Reginator certainly was a titan with the touch paper. But when things are going well, and it's time not to rock the boat, Doug Bowser's ability to turn almost any journalistic inquiry into a generic response is probably a great asset. He's hugely unlikely to, as they say, commit news in any of his answers. Doug Bowser's counterpart in Nintendo Europe, Stephen Boll, is also an executive officer. Boll was the managing director of Nintendo France back in 1993 and has climbed the company since, succeeding Satoru Shibata as the head of Nintendo Europe in 2018. Finally, there is another Yoshiaki in the senior management team besides Yoshiaki Koizumi. This is Yoshiaki Kuratsune, who is the general manager of the Global Communications Division. You may well have seen his work. While creating an advertisement for 1994's Super Metroid, he caused a brief fire in the studio. As he said, "I actually wanted to shoot real fire arrows. I was persuaded because the fire arrows in the movie Gladiator were compositing and live action. That's because technology has advanced, but in fact, there was an order that Kuratsune should not use fire." Apart from being banned from setting things on fire, Kuratsune-san also created a Zelda rap commercial for which he had to audition 300 people to find a suitable link, plus a rather interesting Famicom Wars advertisement. Kuratsune-san described the reaction to this live-action advertisement that involved an American shoot and no actual game footage as being considered a heresy, and yet clearly this out-of-the-box thinking surprised and delighted the Nintendo head honchos in the end. The explanation for this choice is that it's difficult to convey the fun of simulation games, so he conveyed the fun of the game in a different way that was unique to him. Clearly, this degree of original thinking has led to Yoshiaki Kuratsune being at the top of Nintendo, although, as far as we know, he is still not allowed to use fire. Last but not least, there is one other executive officer, and it is a man who has been associated with Nintendo's biggest icon for a very long time. Takashi Tezuka may always have been slightly in the shadow of Shigeru Miyamoto, but as the assistant director and game designer on the original Super Mario Bros., the director of The Lost Level, Super Mario Bros. 3, the original Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, and Super Mario World, as well as producing and supervising any number of games in the period since, including many 2D Mario titles, he is an absolute icon of gaming and deserves to be feted just as much as any of the other iconic figures at Nintendo. Now he is in his 60s, and with over 4 decades of experience at Nintendo under his belt, he is still very much based in Nintendo EPD, recently talking about his work with the Super Mario Wonder staff, although he has branched out into other areas. For example, he was heavily involved in bringing the Super Mario Lego sets into being. Of course, there is one figure that I have mentioned many times but who is not an executive officer, and that is the president of Nintendo itself, Shuntaro Furukawa. And if you would like me to deep dive his background and his history and how he came to be only the 6th president in Nintendo's more than century-long history of trading, do let me know in the comments. Otherwise, that wraps up our tour of the executive officers of Nintendo, but as promised on screen are videos relating to other recent changes in the director structure. As ever, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon for another Nintendo Forecast.